Hello, thank you so much for watching the Sashiko Live Streaming. This is Sushi, and I will try my best to talk in English today. Let's see what I can do. Just a second, okay, I'm sorry. おはようございます。こんにちは。どうもです。Sashiko配信やっていこうと思うんですが、今日は英語をメインでやろうかと思っています。どうなるかわからないんですけど、ちょっと英語をメインでやろうと思ってます。お付き合いいただけたら幸いです。ちょっとごめんね。So the topic would be appreciated. I would like to have a topic if there's any. I might not answer the questions if the question is very repetitive. I don't mind repeating several times, but yeah, the topic may be a good idea. Sakura. I do have some. I brought some topic with me. Sorry, Sakura. Sorry, my cat is very jealous when I. Sakura, ちょっとやめて。So this is the live streaming where I stitch and talk about Sashiko today, mainly in English. I try my best to do that. But at the same time, there's nothing going on here. I won't be doing much things here. So if you could bring some of your stuff, like the handcrafting or something to drink. If you're in the US area, if you are in the American continent, it's going to be at nighttime and then. So yeah, this is the live streaming where I stitch, and ideally if you could stitch, that would be great too. Sakura, can you go somewhere else? Okay, you have to go. The question, do I consider it Sashiko if someone does the stitching in a basic embroidery floss instead of the Sashiko thread? The question number one was that, do I consider is Sashiko if someone does the stitching in the basic embroidery floss instead of Sashiko thread? It really depends on what they would like to do. My first impression or even question to them who use the embroidery floss for the Sashiko is, why do they have to call Sashiko if they do not use the Sashiko thread? I mean, don't they have the name for what they do, like regular embroidery, or like what is the point of using the foreign word for what they do? Probably they want to get attention by using that word. If that's the reason, it's kind of shallow. If they use it because after knowing the difference from the Sashiko thread and embroidery floss, yet they cannot get it due to the financial issues or regional issues, then I don't have any problem with them calling their stitching Sashiko if they want to. But why do they have to? What is the reason they call their stitching Sashiko if they do not try to understand the Japanese not even culture, stories behind it? There are reasons that we use this specific thread, and by saying that embroidery floss is okay, if they know the difference, that's perfectly fine. If they know the difference and if they purposefully use that embroidery floss for their stitching after understanding the difference, I don't think there's any problems. But if they think that embroidery floss is okay because that's cheaper or that's more convenient to get, then they might be destroying the culture of Sashiko thread manufacture. And that's that's the cultural significance, because there are big difference between the Sashiko thread and embroidery floss. For that, I do have the YouTube Sashiko Story Volume 2 or 3 on YouTube. You can find my talking, like what is the purpose of thread. I talked about the different purpose of the thread. The purpose of Sashiko thread is not the same as the embroidery floss. So your question is kind of very good, but it's similar to can I take a cough syrup when I get sick? Yes, you can, of course. Go ahead. You have to, if you're coughing when you get sick, if you're coughing, yes, cough syrup might be a good idea to take, but it does not reduce your fever. And you have to kind of know what you want to do. What you have to have the purpose, and then you have to pick the right tool, right supply for that. And using the embroidery floss, I cannot say this word, embroidery floss for the Sashiko itself is not wrong, but it's kind of scary if they completely get satisfied with that, because they're missing a very great part of Sashiko. So I'll talk about thread a little bit because I just got the thread restocked. It took forever due to COVID, but I got some package from Japan. So I will, yes, my store, my upcyclestitches.com store had been very empty last 10 months or so. But I just recently got this thread stocked. I mean, not that much, but still better than nothing. So there are difference between the Sashiko thread and embroidery floss, and after learning that difference, of course, it is okay. I will consider their stitching Sashiko, but if they try to ignore the difference, then I probably have to speak up. Speak up the difference so they can know. After this thread, I will talk about the Sashiko thread a little bit. I mean, it is not easy to get the Sashiko thread if you live in. It is probably easy to get it in US and Australia, probably Canada too. Those are the countries that's not that difficult to get the thread I recommend. I mean, the US is easiest because I can supply that. And I can supply it to anywhere in the world, but this shipping fee can be pretty high. And it's going to be difficult to deliver it to the South America and also some part of the Europe because of the difficult logistics. So, but there are some good substitute too, so I will talk about that a little bit later. So I'm just taking a note. The question is, because I have to make a note. I cannot remember what I said, unlike the Japanese one. What? No. Do I consider it Sashiko? It's okay. I mean, I talk in English, but at the same time, it's my second language. I learned how to speak English when I was 19. So, you know, it's a good privilege to have, but it's kind of not that easy. So that was the first question, and then logistics is, I talked about that. And based on the topic, I can elaborate what I can talk. You are doing fantastic. I wish I could speak my second language so well. Well, I had to, so. It's good that I can. So yeah, anybody can learn from this. I mean, I do not edit anything what I do. Pretty much the Japanese culture, Japanese sort of craft. I would say crafting, or even like traditional crafting or art or even performance. They really do not have the curriculum per se. Of course, they have their own like secret manuals or like probably books or something like that. But the principle of learning in the Japanese culture is by looking. So for example, in the sushi, very very like an authentic traditional sushi restaurant, the future sushi chef, which is, we can probably call it apprentice is usually not allowed to touch any knives or fish until the third year of their practice. So the first 2 years they don't even touch the knives. They just clean the store, they work as the servers, and they just look what the masters or senpai is the senior apprentice do. Right now, because of the different needs, many sushi school are there, but that's how this very traditional sushi place were. I mean, they pass down their own techniques based on that. It is very inefficient. It's very inefficient and it's very unproductive. But I think there are something besides the technique and how to, of course, in making sushi as well. So I wouldn't deny those 10 years apprenticeship before even being the sushi chef. There might be something there. And I do teach Sashiko as the curriculum. I have 6 hours of workshop to pretty much give them whatever I can. And that's the only workshop they have to take at this moment. But at the same time, people can learn by just watching it. That's how I learned. But it took like 20 years to do it. And I don't want you to go through 20 years to do that, and that's why I kind of made an easier way, like a detour, not even detour, path to avoid detour. But what I teach is just the beginning of Sashiko. It's not the ending, just the beginning. By learning what I do, you can expand your own Sashiko, and you can see a lot of people doing that, following my account. Okay, I'm gonna start drinking. It's not alcohol, so I'm not gonna say something crazy. Don't worry about it. I will talk about the thread a little bit. Okay, thread. I use, to begin with, I'm sorry, before I explain anything, I sell only the item I use. If I don't use it, I don't sell it. That's my policy in the store. So this is this thread I always use. This one is the same color. It's the kind of original unbleached white color. This is 145 meters. It's quite big skein, and it's gonna take a long time to finish this much. This is the best Sashiko thread I can think of for the purpose of Sashiko. And the purpose of Sashiko is not making the beautiful embroidery for that matter. But at the same time, this is not so available all over the world, unfortunately. And the supply is gonna be more limited because of the COVID, and the supply is going through a little bit difficult time. So, I mean, little shift for that matter. Yeah, little shift. So you may not be able to get this thread, the same thread. If you live in the US or Japan, it's not a big, I mean, you can get it without any issues. But if you live in if you live in a country where the postal service is not that good, I wouldn't say not that good, not that countable, it might be a little bit difficult to get it, or it might be expensive to get it. So I keep receiving a lot of kind of questions. Should I use the Sashiko thread? The answer is yes. I want you to first understand the difference between the Sashiko thread and non-Sashiko thread. There's significant difference. It's like, I use the example taking the cough syrup for the headache. It's like that. It's both medicine, but there's a different purpose to heal. Sashiko thread can be like that, significantly different. So this is the thread I've been using entire my life. At least this is the thread from the manufacturer that I've been using through my life. But this manufacturer is not doing. This manufacturer is not that great, not that big. This is a great manufacturer, but it's very small, and they cannot make a lot of thread. So instead, I started using the other manufacturer's thread, which is much bigger than this manufacturer. This is the thread I started using 3 years ago, and after 2 years of practicing it, I came to the conclusion that this can be a very good substitute of this. And since this company is pretty big, probably you can find a distributor in your country. I know that there are one in Europe, so you don't have to worry about VAT. Of course, there are some in the Australia or New Zealand, around that area, Oceanian countries. The US, I sell it, and there are several companies or shops to carry that. South America, probably yes. I've seen people using this one in the Spanish, Portuguese, so maybe I cannot distinguish if they're from Spain or Portuguese or Brazil or South American countries. So I don't know about it, but this is much easier thread to get in comparison to the thread I use here. I prefer this one, but at the same time, those are not that. I mean, those thread can do everything I do this one. Like, for example, I do not make any knot. If you use the embroidery floss, it may not work. The technique might not work. This does work. So after 2 years, I confirmed that this works. And if you live in a country where it's difficult to get those thread from me, this is the good substitute. It's called Daruma Sashiko Thread, Daruma by Yokota. They're a very good company. I became kind of friend with one of those person who is in charge of sales. We exchange a lot of information about how Sashiko became the popular all over the world. So this is a good substitute. And if you live in the US, I try my best to be competitive in the pricing, so please try to. I don't want to say please try. Your support will be appreciated. I do have like a bulk discount for this, probably the small scale as well. So if you see my store, there are other stores in the US who sell this thread, and their pricing is a little bit cheaper than ours. I don't know how they can do that with paying tax and shipping fee. Well, probably they're doing a lot of mass selling, which I don't. So, but they can focus on selling. I don't focus on selling much. I like to stitch. I like to talk about those things on Instagram. I have to write not have to. I would like to write stories every day. Writing a story on Instagram every day is not that easy, especially because it's the second language. Anyway, that's a lot of complaining. Not complaining. That's a lot of kvetching, if that's the word for that. So that's the thread. So my store, upcyclestitches.com is my store, has been listing a lot of thread saying sold out, and still is, because I haven't changed that status yet. But I got the thread back in stock little by little. So this surface shipping started arriving little by little. So I will start changing the status after I confirm the condition. I do not sell any bad condition thread. I use it for myself. So yeah, please check it out if you are thinking about thread. There's a significant difference between the Sashiko thread and embroidery floss. I mean, you can use the embroidery floss for Sashiko stitching, as I said in the beginning of this live streaming, but I want you to know the difference, and I want you to choose the one for your best practice. This is like a little side story. Back in 1960s, 1960, like 50 years ago, 60 years ago, that's the time my family started doing the Sashiko business. Like they started focusing on making money out of Sashiko about 50 years, 60 years. They did not have this Sashiko thread per se. They had a thread, but they did not have the thread for Sashiko. And come to think of that, it is really interesting to have the thread for Sashiko, because Sashiko is not that big trend in Japan. But many Japanese people, including my family, spend a lot of effort and probably a lot of money to come up with this thread. This is the story from my friend, but before they made the Sashiko thread like this, they were twisting their basting thread, a very, very thin thread that you can even snip it without the clipper. They were twisting like 4 or 6 or 8 or even 5, I don't know, numbers depends, but those numbers of thread twisting together to make the Sashiko thread manually. And the result is this Sashiko thread made from the manufacturer. So I don't want to lose it. I don't want to go back to the age that I have to twist my Sashiko thread before I start stitching. That's a little... I'm so spoiled for that matter, but I cannot go back there. Like, I don't mind preparing the fabric to stitch because that's the part of the designing. You know, I can change the size of patterns, I can change the patterns. So the preparing the patterns on the fabric is not that pain in the butt. But making the thread, twisting the thread each time I stitch, that's a little bit too much. But I want to share that they made those thread with even spending that much time because they needed that kind of thread. And that's the Sashiko thread we use now and we call it. So thank you for the question. The first question was really good. Do I consider it Sashiko if they use the embroidery floss in their stitching? My answer is it depends. But I like to, of course I can, of course, Sashiko stitching can be done by anything. And of course it can be done with the embroidery floss. But my first question is, do they know the difference? And do they know those stories? Probably not, because that's not that much translated. And I just don't want to go back to those ages that they had to work to get there. It is about like 50 years, like as I said, 50 years, 60 years. That's about the time which, sorry, it has been 50 or 60 years since the Sashiko got revived in the major market. I don't know if we call it market, but many Japanese discontinued Sashiko when they got a little wealthier, and then they revived Sashiko in each local area. There are about 9 named Sashiko and probably millions of unknown Sashiko. But the revive happened, interestingly, simultaneously around 1960, 1970. And since then, they accumulated a lot of wisdom and techniques. I just don't want to be. I just don't want them to be overpainted by saying, "Well, we cannot get the Sashiko thread, so embroidery floss is just fine." That just fine is quite irresponsible if they don't know the stories. Well, that's why I share the stories, because usually, decent people will think. I don't wanna force them to choose Sashiko thread, but they will probably stop and think, what is the difference between Sashiko thread and other thread? Well, for that matter, anything is actually the matter of thinking. So that was the story of Sashiko thread. Wow, I talked a lot, almost 10 minutes. If there is any other topic request, I would do it. I am proud of myself, keep talking in English for 30 minutes. Oh, そうなんですよね. There was a comment from a Japanese person. She's my friend. Wait, but you understand English though. ね、自分で糸を寄らねばならない時代には戻りたくないんですよね. See? She understands English and she was nice enough to comment me in Japanese. One of the biggest reasons, though, this is something I would like to share, I should probably be sharing. One of the biggest reasons I share live streaming in Japanese is because I don't trust myself much. I do know that what I went through is real because that's my childhood. But at the same time, because my Sashiko is very limited. In fact, any Sashiko is limited. There's no such a thing as this Sashiko which gonna cover all of the Japanese Sashiko. Therefore, I am kind of skeptical about the knowledge I have. Therefore, it is very important to share what I know in Japanese so that the other Japanese people, Japanese Sashiko stitchers, can help me out to balance me. I don't want to, like, as much as I write something difficult on the Instagram, I do not want to go out of control. I know that I'm not gonna be able to talk on behalf of the old Japanese people, but at the same time, I do not want to ignore their voice. In fact, that's the main reason that I'm sharing Sashiko. So that's why it's very important for me to speak in Japanese. On top of that, it's much 100 times easier for me to stitch and talk. But that's one biggest reason that I do a lot of live streaming in Japanese. The second biggest reason, probably this might be the first biggest reason, is that I stitch much faster when I talk in Japanese. Probably you see the difference. When I talk in Japanese, I stitch probably 3 times faster than this. So, 3 times is really, that's a big difference. Thank you for you should write a Sashiko history. Well, sure. Not sure. I would love to, and I am preparing, but I haven't found the good publisher yet. From the James Global craft revival of the 70s occurred within the Anglosphere also. Interesting that such culture event cross language. Really, that is very interesting. So, it's about 10 years after the World War II. 15 years after, 15 to 20 years after the World War II. Japan recovered from the World War II pretty quickly and pretty quickly and pretty significantly. It's a lot of, there was a huge jump, huge comeback. And 20 years ago, in 1940s, they had to worry about what they eat. 20 years later, they didn't have to worry about that anymore. So it is kind of understandable that people started looking at what they had to more like identify themselves, especially if there are many people who actually dare to stitch. So as long as I know, there are 8 Sashiko that which got revived around, not around that, 8 Sashiko that got revived after that 1960s, 70s. I am from Brazil. Oh, Mira, I'm sorry. Look, from Mira. I am from Brazil, and during the pandemic, you changed the language later? My pleasure. Thank you so much. Thank you for watching. So it is happening everywhere. And, Sashiko, sorry. Sashiko became a trend, but it doesn't have to be Sashiko. It is very much it has been my dream to introduce Sashiko to the world. but it is quite surprising that it happened this big. All of a sudden. And when I realized it, it was almost out of, not even, like I don't want to control it, but there are several people who are in the expert in Japanese textile and American textile who speak both languages. I had a fortune to talk about Sashiko and the current trend, especially Boro actually for that matter. And she's the one who I always refer to, that she told me that Sushi, you were 10 years late. And, you know, I'm kind of, not kind of, I understand and I agree with her. But that sentence is very true that I'm late. It's too late to talk about Sashiko and Boro like nicely and without sort of modification. But there's one condition though. There's one condition in that statement. It is too late to speak up about Sashiko and Boro without the pain. Which means that if I don't mind the pain, it's not too late. At least I have to believe in that. So that's what I'm doing. I wish I just could stitch, but sometimes people have to go outside of the comfortable zone.すいません。じゃあ日本語ほとんど話せてなくて申し訳ないです。もう少しで終わろうかなと思うんですけど。また、日本語のお話ができる、なんかトピック言語が切り替わらない。また日本語でお話をすることが、お話ができるトピックとかがあったら教えてください。コメントとかいただければ次回話します。話したいことはいっぱいあるので、また次回日本語でやります。全然言語が戻らない。Alright, sorry, I will switch to the English back again. The question 73846. What do you think of Sashiko being trendy? Oh, thank you so much. Thank you for chili. I'll answer one by one. Thank you for teaching us. You have a noble heart. I don't know if it's noble, but I don't know if it's noble. I'm not gonna say yes, but let's see. What size fabric do I prefer to use while stitching? Size? Weight or size? If you could clarify that, that'd be great. Size or weight? So, what do I think of Sashiko being trendy? It's very mixed feeling. It's very mixed feeling. It's like my best friend is being very famous on TV, but on the TV they don't share, they don't introduce the best part of his talent. Let's say my best friend from the childhood, he's extremely funny, let's say. Like when he opened his mouth, he can make anybody happy, everybody smile. Not like dirty jokes, more like happy jokes. He's extremely happy, and he happened to be super hot. Like, you know, looking hot, very handsome. And he, let's say, took the Instagram. Well, well, probably like let's say he looks like a Justin Bieber. Well, maybe you might understand my age, but he might look like somebody, and then TV crew found him, and then they kind of future him to be the second Justin Bieber or Hugh Jackman, whoever it is. But in that, the TV or even audience is not looking for, expecting him to be funny. We, the audience, want him to be hot instead of funny. Of course, that'd be great if he can be hot and funny, but in that moment, the trend only looked at the perspective of handsome. Therefore, the best part of his character is sort of missing. That's what I'm seeing in Sashiko right now. It's good that I can talk Sashiko, and it's good that many people understand the word Sashiko and they can enjoy hand stitching. That's perfectly great. But the more I learn what they do, that I like, they are missing the most delicious part of like, why do they care about stitches size? I don't understand. Well, I mean, I understand it, but that's not the most delicious part of Sashiko. So it's kind of sad, and then it's kind of sad. At the same time, I could be hopeful that someday they may find out that he's funny on top of hotness. So the people who are enjoying Sashiko to make the perfect stitches in order to embrace the imperfection, that's complete BS for me. I'm sorry to use the bad word, but it's complete BS. BS means, I don't want to even say that. But if that's the understanding of Sashiko, they're eating pizza without cheese and calling it pizza. Aren't you gonna be sad? I mean, that's breadstick. I mean, I'm not gonna say cheese is the best part of pizza, but that grease, without that grease, what are you eating? Just breadstick. It's so healthy, it's tasty, but come on. You have clearly communicated that provenance is a critical, vital part of Sashiko. Provenance. God, it's a really challenging word to come in this moment at night. It's okay. I have to ask my daughter, who is 6 years old, what it means. Provenance. I know this word. I've used it before, but I just cannot come up with that right now. My brain's shutting down. It's 10:30. And I'm a father of 6 years old. So please forgive me that. Okay, so the next question, I hope I answered the question how I feel about Sashiko being the trend. And size-wise, I did not expect that question, to be honest. Size. So dimension, right? Like the size of the fabric. I have never actually thought about the size as the dimension. Oh, that's good. Thank you so much for clarifying that. History, family, intergeneric, relational narrative, provenance. Yes, I know that. Thank you. I know. I didn't know, but I remembered probably a part of it. So sorry, the reason I'm laughing is that because I have never thought about it. Like literally, I have never thought about it in my life. And after 3 years of me teaching and doing Sashiko in English, this is the first time I think about what is my favorite dimension. This is the first time question, so I'm really happy to answer that. But just give me a little bit time to think about. What is the weight is a kind of common question, and my answer is the fabric can be almost whatever. It really depends on the preference. Of course, there are a better fabric, like Japanese fabric is much better than the other cotton fabric. Even if the quality or grade is the same, I prefer the Japanese cotton fabric over the Western cotton fabric. I think it's because of the humidity. The Japanese fabric, cotton fabric, is a little bit rougher, more rough. It's kind of see through the wind more, and therefore, like English cotton, not English. The Western cotton is super great. I love those vintage Western cottons, but it's too tight, which means it's too good to stitch, too good to stitch to make fabric stronger. So for the Sashiko purpose, I really prefer the Sashiko fabric that was waved in a way that Sashiko was the size dimension. I've been thinking, like while I'm talking, I've been thinking. I don't have it. That's my preference. I'm sorry. The conclusion, I don't have any preference. Because I sometimes like 3 meters square. I do the denim. I do 3 meters square. I have like a biggest piece is like 4 meters or something. So it has a different entertainment. If it's bigger, there's a way to enjoy it. If it's small, as you can tell, I don't do the small stitches though. I really do not do smaller than probably this much. So let's check it. Probably not smaller than 5-inch square. I can, and I do sometimes if I have to, but I don't pick that project when I want to stitch. I don't want to say bigger the better, but since I don't mind doing a big project, I don't have the preference, but probably bigger than 5-inch square. Yeah, the big Sashiko is kind of fun. I just wrote it today on the Patreon, and I will summarize that article on the Instagram someday, probably tomorrow or day after tomorrow. But I'm trying to stitch 100-meter Asanoha pattern, not 100 feet or 100-inch, 100 meter. So that's how, kind of, not a crazy, but I like to make it big. Oops. Michael Scott is in my mind. I'm the Office freak. The Office, the TV show The Office, American version. That's how I learned The Office and South Park are the two shows that I learned English from. Or probably Breaking Bad too. But I learned English from those shows. So when I say something like big or last long or something like that, Michael Scott comes in my brain. Yeah, it's a bad joke. It's a horrible joke. Would it be correct to say traditional Sashiko and the creation of Boro would geographically... Sorry, James. I'll read that question again. Just a second, okay? Could you then... Would it be correct, the question, would it be correct to say traditional Sashiko and the creation of Boro would geographically place the where as in form of the patches moved from materials availability, you could tell where the where was from. Yes, and yes. The quick answer is yes. I think we can distinguish which Sashiko jacket is around where. I don't think we can identify which family or which exact location, but I think we can define around where. But I think I'm not the best one to talk about it because my Sashiko do not practice Boro much. In fact, my Sashiko artisans hated Boro. I think they still do. They don't want to do Sashiko. They don't want to even talk about Boro. So my knowledge is quite limited in terms of Boro because it's from the books and pretty much it's not the first information as much as I want it to be like my Sashiko. My Sashiko is, pretty much all of them are first information, but Boro is a little bit more second information because none of them wanted to talk about it. They just they don't even deny it. Like, what is the word? Like, when I asked them, like, can you talk about Boro? They said, what is Boro? Okay, that's the end of the story. They, ignore the fact that they did. I am sure that they did, but they did not want to talk about it. So we don't have that much Boro left in my family for that. My mother is making one too because she's kind of offspring of the family. But I think they can distinguish. I can distinguish which Sashiko is ours for that matter, if that's gonna help. And then those Sashiko can be Boro in the future because I define Sashiko as the hand stitching and Boro is the ultimate result of Sashiko. So if I can define which Sashiko is which, I think Boro can be distinguished. Is it too much jump? But I think that can be the answer for that. Wow, that was a kind of good summary. Oh, it's okay. I think I understand your question, right? Like, I understand your question, and I hope I answered to your question. Boro is a little bit difficult to discuss. That's why I really don't write. Well, I do write a lot about Boro, but not as confident as Sashiko. I mean, Boro literally means piece of crap, trash. I'm using a bad word. I'm using a good word. it could be worse. So I do not know what is easier, but thank you very much for your answer. My pleasure. I hope I answered that. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot one more question. As in from the patches, from material availability, you could tell where what's from. Would this be true for the stitches? I think so. I think so is the answer. I mean, I said those. Well, there are three major sashiko, and there are about 8 sashiko with names. They have their own sort of characteristic. They're not the same. They are all different. Therefore, I keep saying that it's so difficult and completely dangerous to say that one sashiko is right, because among those 8 sashiko plus 3 major sashiko, let's say 11 plus an unknown sashiko, of course it's impossible to define the answer. Like, I can be correct in my sashiko, but I cannot talk on behalf of the other sashiko as if that what I do is the correct answer. That's why I keep saying that there's no right and wrong in sashiko. Of course, there's right and wrong in what I do, but that does not mean that the other people follow that. So I think we can distinguish, at least there are some characteristics in each sashiko. And that kind of, connect to today's post that I made. Since each sashiko are slightly different, sometimes significantly different, some of the techniques are very unique. Not a technique, not only the technique, but the style are pretty unique. So I know who copies it, and it's perfectly fine to copy it. If you want to copy what I do, please do. That's the whole reason that I'm sharing it. If you want to copy it, just copy it, but please mention my name too. I copied it from him, and I'm teaching it. I'm making money. That's perfectly fine. Go ahead. I'm not gonna say that that's my credit, but to avoid any misunderstanding. So this is a little bit complaining. It's a little bit complaining. So if you don't like it, just don't hear that. It is so interesting. Like, before 2016, I did not share anything online, and no videos, no sashiko, because I was not allowed. Until 2014, I was not allowed to share any of those what I'm doing right now online. So nothing was online. Until 2016, I was not allowed to make any single money because I was the immigrant to the US and I couldn't work. So I couldn't share anything for that matter. Even if somebody wanted to learn from me, I couldn't even ask for that money. So it is very recent that I started sharing this form and pretty much everything. Then there are a lot of people who are doing the exactly same thing. All of a sudden, yes, it is the trend, and I'm not gonna say that it is I'm not gonna say it's impossible. I am not going to say that I am 100% sure for that, but that's a little bit of too much coincidence. Whew. Anyway, if Sashiko is, just a second. What did I miss? If Sashiko is connected to place, then Sashiko would reflect place. Therefore, correct Sashiko will reflect its correct place. Yeah, that's it. I mean, That's why I keep saying that the Sashiko now translated in English is not wrong at all. They are not wrong. They are all correct. Because if they learned from Japanese, I hope they learn from Japanese for that matter. If they learn from Japanese, that Japanese should be part of what somewhat either named or nameless Sashiko community or Sashiko anything. Maybe they're a single person. So what they learn, what they share is not wrong at all. But it is very dangerous to say that that is the Sashiko. Like the only Sashiko. Because that's ignoring the other Sashiko, which may be connected to the place. Probably place though. They really do not travel and they do not differentiate by the other titles. So okay, I will do one more line of thread and I will go off today. So the question, this is what is it kind of translated right now. Nobody in my family or in my experience told me that stitches has to be even. But stitches become even. Do you see the difference? Many Western people right now is focusing how to make stitches even. And thank you so much for the question, Marisol. The question is, the stitches must be the same size. They need to be sympathetic or just be consistent with the size. The answer is that it depends. It depends, and it's gonna be even. Like if you kind of change the stitches size from this big and this big, like, you know, one part of stitch is this big and one part of this, then probably you need a hoop to make that kind of project, which become probably embroidery. Sashiko sort of requires even stitch. It's not the requirement, but it's very big part of Sashiko stitching because we do not focus on making even stitches. It's great that you can make even stitches, but we do not focus on that. It becomes even. Symmetric. No, symmetric is... There's nothing related to symmetric in Sashiko. The Sashiko doesn't have to be symmetric at all. Okay, one last. ありがとうございました。もうこの1本で終わろうかなと思っています。久々にずっと英語でいけました。どれだけ日本人の方が今いてくださるかわかんないんですけど、また次回は日本語で、やっぱり言語決めてやった方が気持ちよくいけるので、配信の頭に、配信始めるときに今日は日本語でやるよ、今日は英語でやるよって書こうと思います。題名にね。なので、またそれを目安に遊びに来てもらえたらいいかなと思います。だいたいコメント欄には書くけどね。コメント欄には今日の配信は英語ですって書くけど、何言おうとしたんだっけ。そう、日本語でやるときはまた日本語でもお話ししたいことがあるんですけど、さすがに2回連続日本語だけでやっちゃったので、クレームってわけでもないんですけど、まあ確かにねっていうね、お話だったので、今日はこの差し子糸1本で終わろうと思います。Alright, so if I will put this one on the YouTube as the archive. If you're watching this as the archive, you may leave the questions or topic request to talk for me to talk about next time. I do not know when I do the live streaming in English again. It's purely unexpected. When I can do it, I do it. Like when I'm not that tired in that day, I will do that. So I cannot promise when I would do it, but I will save all of the videos with after editing the timeline, that I add some of the questions with captions, stuff like that. After editing, I will upload it to the YouTube and you can rewatch it. Or if you're watching it as the archive, I hope you can get the questions as well. Yep, after this much thread, I will go off. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoy Sashiko tonight or today. Depends on where you live. Thank you from America. I am in America too. Why there is like 4 hours difference from the East Coast and West Coast? I'm extremely sleepy now, and but in the California or like West Coast, it's probably like dinner time, right? So probably this is not the best time for the west side of the American side, which is my biggest customer. But that's how that's how I am, how bad I am to do. This is not, I don't consider this as the marketing tool, but that's how I get I don't kind of angry. I get sometimes the angry advice from my friends who really worry about me, that I'm so bad at sort of being efficient. Like, statistically speaking, the biggest customers that I have is from the west coast of US. So I should really do this live streaming when they can focus on like prime time. So for the Texas, yeah, Texas, New York, Florida, this is a great time. But it's okay. I do Sashiko stitching when I can. あ、しのぶさんありがとうございます。いつも。ずっといてくれたの？マジで？ほんといつもありがとうございます。But yeah, that's my another question, and I will not. This is not that important to me. But they're my friend, but they're really. I respect them and sincerely appreciate their advice. Without their advice, I'm not here. I like my mindset is very Japanese for that matter. So without their mindful and very Western advice, I wouldn't be here by now. I don't have that mindset, and I would have backed off so much. Like I really like I have to list their names when I write a book. お疲れ様でした。ありがとうございます。レイコさんもいてくださったんですね。すいません。英語でも分かってる感じがしてちょっと微妙に怖かったりはするんですけど、分かってるんだろうな。I don't know how many people are here with the Patreon, but this is the Patreon that I shared today. Not a Patreon. This is the project I explained today on Patreon, which I'm gonna introduce on the Instagram soon. So it's crazy. I don't really consider anything crazy, but this might be a crazy. ねえ、聞くだけならいけてますよね。多分ほぼほぼ分かってらっしゃるんだろうな。てかもしかしたら全部分かってらっしゃるんだろうなと思うとちょっと途中から緊張しだしましたよ。緊張するよ、日本人の方で分かってくださる方が聞いてるってなるとね、やっぱり。よし。From now on, I try my best to I try my best to put the title that this is gonna be the live streaming in Japanese and this is gonna be the live streaming in English. I will try to separate them as much as I can. It doesn't mean that I speak only one language, but I try my best to. Well, I don't have to try my best to speak in Japanese. I will try my best to kind of separate them. Like today, I hope you got a title that I wrote, English live streaming. Yes, finally. So when you see those things, when you see those titles, I try my best. If you see the title saying in Japanese, then I might not. It depends on my mood too, so let's see. Okay. Naka. Yes. All right. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you sometimes in the future. ありがとうございました。おやすみなさい。バイバイ。